learning about different enterprises around um, around Black cooperative economics and history. All right. And then session 2, we had Black feminisms, principles, and values. And we had Danielle McCauley, who's one of the co-founders of North Star, join us in the morning to really ground us in Black feminisms and cooperative history, and we learned about different figures like Harriet Tubman, who's considered the general of cooperatives, Ida B. Wells, Fannie Lou Hamer, just different cooperative stars that we talked about. So really grounding ourselves in this history around Black feminisms and how it relates to cooperative work. And then in the afternoon, we had Dominique Pearson join us, who connected Black feminisms and principles and values. And we had a really robust discussion. Does anyone want to share any maybe thoughts, insights that have maybe stuck with you from that session that they would add to that time? Anything that you've been pondering or thinking about with session 2?
It was just more of like the history of co-ops and like the different kinds that serve different purposes. Even the one in Minnesota was interesting. I think it was St. Paul. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to share anything? I believe we also watched that TED Talk. I'm forgetting the name of the woman, but we watched that TED Talk about, I believe, feminisms in the African context, and just like, is feminism, I'm forgetting the title, but I just remember we had a lot of good discussion around that as well. Yes. All right. And then I'll continue. So session 3, we had Dr. Rose Brewer with us the whole time, rethinking capitalism and getting really good history and context around that, as well as just alternate other strategies, right? Other things that we can look to instead of beyond capitalism, like what are other ways, solidarity economies, just different things. So I know that was a full session, a lot of content, but curious, we watched a video around, I believe it was around the housing market, but also just how that shows up, the redlining, different things there. But curious what thoughts, insights, things that are sticking with people from that session, since we were with Dr. Rose Brewer the whole time. Anything that folks want to share as we kind of just look backwards to look ahead as well? I know we had some good discussions in small groups, I think, that day. So I'm curious if anything's sticking out to anyone that they want to think about. If not, we can keep moving. All right. And then just finally touching on our first Black study session that we had, Kwanzaa and Cooperation. We had Kenna Cotman with Voice of Culture and Titilayo Bediako of We Win Institute join us in a really educational, informative, just really holding space around the practices of Kwanzaa, and really walked us through each day, each principle. And yeah, it was a really special space. So if you were there, I'm glad you could be there. It really felt warm and just really community centered, really centering Black culture and community in that time. So now we are the new year. We're getting deeper into some of the more technical aspects. And we have our colleague Patty Biafra with us, joining us from the Shared Ownership Center at Nexus. Welcome. I am gonna read your bio real briefly. I know we also sent that out, but just so can do an introduction here. So again, welcome, Patty. Let me get my screen set up. All right. So Patty joined Nexus to lead the Worker Owner Initiative, WOI, which is part of Nexus's community wealth building strategy. She helps companies assess employee ownership as a model for stronger businesses and creates employee and community wealth. The vision is to raise awareness of these models so that business ownership, quality jobs, and community self-determination are accessible to all of us. Patty has been working with small businesses and nonprofits for over 14 years in a variety of roles, primarily focused on the people side of operational change. She has worked with over 30 companies at various stages in their journey to employee ownership. Patty truly takes pride and joy in helping groups envision and implement their future. She was born in Colombia to biracial parents and counts over 40 first cousins. Patty draws from her personal experience growing up in Miami, Florida, where 54% of the population is foreign born, and she learned that she can find common ground with just about anyone. In Patty's free time, she enjoys paddleboarding, hiking, hand building pottery, singing, dancing, and spending time with her family and dog Stella. Welcome, Patty. Thank you for being here and joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm super excited. I wish I had joined a little bit earlier, but I also have a baby. Not about that. And so, yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'll be talking about worker cooperatives, real estate investment cooperatives specifically, but I'll go over a little bit, what cooperatives are and what the movement is, and specifically, how they get created. That is my day job, creating cooperatives, and I love talking about that. If you have questions along the way, when I'm sharing, I usually can't see the chat, so if you just want to pop in, that's fine, or if you want to put in the chat, Nikuli or Leanna can stop me. And yeah, let's get into it. Let me pull this up. Okay, so talked about what we are going to do today. The Shared Ownership Center at Nexus. So I'm the director of the Worker Ownership Initiative. I have a co-director who is the director of the Shared Ownership Center. And really, we are a team of consultants that help BIPOC communities develop both real estate investment cooperatives and worker cooperatives. We also work with cities and municipalities to make it easier for cooperatives to exist, to be created. And we see that, as part of community wealth building, having democratically owned enterprises is one piece of creating wealth. This is our team. So on the left bottom here, that is Christina Nicholson. She is our cooperative finance specialist. You see me, and then Benjamin is the director of the Shared Ownership Center. We recently went through a name change as we started to expand from worker ownership to just broader shared ownership. And so, what we see as shared ownership is control over resources, both when we're talking at the micro level of a business, right? Employees are often called a resource, thus the name human resources, but don't often have control over their work, over the direction of the business, and at a macro level, at the community level, right, having control over real estate, control over who comes into a community, who can buy land, and so there's the control piece, but there's also the piece of creating wealth, right? When you have control and when you have ownership of these assets, then that wealth stays in the community, stays in the business, and it benefits the users of that asset. So cooperative attributes, again, so this will come up, right? They're democratically owned, meaning you have members, they each have a vote in governance, and we'll get into what that means. But there is democracy built into it. They're democratically controlled, and they're democratically benefiting. So just like you have ownership and you have control, you also have the right to share in those profits and the right to have financial transparency, and really not just financial transparency, but transparency over what's happening in the organization. Cooperatives adhere to the 7 international co-op principles, and so you heard democratically owned, and that kind of ties into that open and voluntary membership, meaning it's not like a partnership, right? So in a sort of corporate partnership, you get to choose who your partner is, and you don't have to expand. In a cooperative, you have to have an objective way for people to become members of the cooperative. And so, you're opening it up to the community, to others, not just to a small group of founders. Autonomy and independence. So that's a key one, right? Cooperatives are part of the economy, but tend to work with themselves. There's autonomy built into the model. Education and training, we just kind of talked about, right? Having transparency over what's happening in the business. And so that leads to education, right? If you're going to have people voting on things, if you're going to have people who are who have control over the organization, you also want to make sure that people have education and have an understanding of how things work. So it's a beneficial circle of giving people the information they need to make the decisions that they need to make. So to form a co-op, a group of people, the most simple explanation is people come together to democratically meet their common needs. So there's different types of cooperatives. A lot of people are familiar with consumer cooperatives and housing cooperatives. So consumer cooperative, that's your grocery store that, sometimes you have are cooperatively owned, meaning you as a shopper own part of that cooperative. On a larger scale, you have something like REI. They're a consumer cooperative. You're a shopper there. When you buy something at the end of the year, you might get a couple cents back. There's farmer and producer cooperatives. So that's where a couple of farmers, we'll use farmers as producers. They produce vegetable goods, and they come together to put their goods together and sell them, right? So they're producing something together, and that central sort of place where all of their products come together, that's the cooperative, right? So that thing sells out into the market, and whatever profit comes in goes back to the farmers. It's key here that in a traditional business, Profit is distributed based on how much capital you've put into the business. So if I put $5 and Leanna put $10, she's going to get 2/3 of the profit. I'm going to get 1/3. In a cooperative, profit is often distributed by how much you've contributed in product or labor, right? So in a farmer's cooperative, if I come to the market with 2 tons of carrots and Leanna has 1 ton of carrots, then it gets split by that amount, not how much money. I see there's a question or hand up. Yeah.
I don't see anything, no.
Okay.
Oh, Patty, sorry, a question just in the chat. Is this just for products or also for services?
It can be for services as well. So, we're working with a group right now. They're all consultants. And so they're not a worker cooperative because they each kind of work independently, but they're creating a structure where someone will do all of their invoicing. They're going to buy a software system that they all need to use together, right? So they're sort of sharing the assets. And then at the end of the year, any profit that's made from that asset gets distributed back to the individuals based on how much they've contributed work to the cooperative. And then you have real estate. So these last two we'll get into in more depth, but real estate, you have a group of folks. So you have your housing, right, where housing cooperatives are housing, not commercial. And folks come together, they buy a building and they own that building together, right? And so it helps them keep costs low. Usually there's food sharing. Usually there's also some work aspect of it, right? Some contributing to upkeep of the real estate. And then you have commercial real estate, which we'll talk about today, where a group can come together, buy parcel of commercial real estate. And again, they control that real estate. It can be the same tenants or it can be community members. And in that way, that real estate is kept in the community. And finally, worker co-ops. That's what I think a lot of us are most familiar with. That's a business where the workers, be they hospitality, be it manufacturing, be it tech, they own the business. And so usually profits are distributed there by number of hours worked, especially if you have people that work more hours or less hours. And yeah. Okay. So an example of what governance looks like in a co-op, you have your membership, right? Those are all your members. Those can be your farmers. Those can be your workers. It can be your consumers, right? The member is the user. They elect a board of directors. The majority should be from the membership. Sometimes co-ops can have board of directors that aren't, or directors that aren't members of the co-op. They're going to hire and evaluate a manager or an executive team, and that manager or executive team implements the board directives, right? So if we're talking about a worker co-op, that manager or executive team usually supervises the members. So there's, again, that beneficial circle of we all have to work together and kind of wear different hats. If it's a farmer cooperative, then that manager is really just it's more coordinating the farmers, right, than necessarily supervising. So benefits, we've talked about, keeping money in the local economy. Shared ownership businesses are more resilient. I definitely saw that myself during the pandemic. All of the companies that we work with, doesn't mean they didn't have a hard time, but they all came out stronger, I would say. And I think they all fared better than if they had one owner who would have laid people off and, called it a day. Increased voice in decision making and access to information. I think that's like the thing that I see the most is, we spend a lot of time at work. And so being active in what's happening, having a say in the direction of the business, I think really changes people's perception of what work should be, changes people's perception of what to expect from a supervisor or from a business. And I think that's a pretty powerful thing because it goes a long way towards changing what we expect from our economy. I see some chat.
Yeah, from Queen Edrons, for those back to governance, and the manager or executive team can be removed, or can the manager and executive team be removed?
Yes, they can be removed. So you can have they can be removed if they're not doing a good job. There's an evaluation aspect of it. You can also not have a manager. In some aspects, they can be collective. That works better for smaller organizations, where you might have management implemented by committees or by shift. There's a co-op out in the Bay Area called Arizmendi. They take turns taking a shift in the office. And so it's a bakery. And so, you might have to be in the office a couple days a month, and do payroll, run shifts, all of that kind of stuff. Whereas other ones will have committees where where things happen.
And from Nishana, how does this differ from an NPO?
What is an NPO?
Great question. Nishana?
A nonprofit organization. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, sure. Nonprofit organizations, in the name, they don't make a profit. Cooperatives are a business. And so that's a really great question, because they are a business that, we believe has a positive impact on the economy. But they are a business. And so there is profit. They would get taxed for profit. If there isn't profit, then you're operating at a loss, and eventually your business will, cease to function. So there is the biggest difference here is that, I'm thinking of you'll see some examples soon, but these are businesses. There's an underlying business, an asset to it, that just happens to work differently than what you normally see.
Got it. So like when you're structuring a co-op, when you first started, and let's say, just for example, if you're registering a business, you're just getting started, anybody who wants to do this, they set up the business as a co-op, or set it up as a co-op is a business, but how do you set up a business to be a co-op? Because the structure of it is very similar to a nonprofit organization, the way it's set up with the different members and executives and things like that. So when you're structuring this, is it something that's structured like do you register it as a co-op, or do you register it as some form of business? Like what is that considered?
Yeah, it's considered a co-op. So some states, Minnesota has a cooperative statute. So you can choose to be a corporation, an S corporation, an LLC, or a cooperative corporation. And so you set the business up as a co-op. You need at least 3 members. And so just like you would start a partnership, usually when co-ops start fresh, there's a small number of people. There's 3 people that are kind of setting things up. And you do need a board. You need a board for regular businesses too. It's just that usually that person is the owner. Like there's less rules there. And so you would need your board. Your members can be your board. And as far as management, one of them can be management. So there's a lot of like crossover between who's on the board, who the members are, who management is. Management can be part of the membership. But you would just set it up like a regular business.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Another question, how would this work with wellness professionals, workers, and real estate, like a wellness center? Would it have to be 2 different co-ops?
Can you tell me more? So there's a wellness center and there's real estate agents, or?
Queen, could you come off mute and maybe explain more?
Sure. So my question was like, say for example, like you mentioned, like a worker co-op would be like wellness professionals, like yoga teachers, coaches, therapists, doulas, right?
Mhm.
And then for the real estate part is like getting real estate for a wellness center. So like, would it have to be 2 separate co-ops you have to create? One for the workers to be like a collective together, and then a separate one for the purchase of the wellness center?
Got it. So no, so the co-op can own real estate on its own, right? The worker co-op can own real estate on its own. Then there's a different type of co-op, which we'll talk about, that is a real estate investment co-op. And so they're usually buying like large commercial parcels. There could be a situation where the co-op is one of the owners of that real estate investment co-op. But if they just own their single space, then they're just a business that happens to be a co-op owning real estate. Did that make sense?
So you said they could either be just a business, which is a co-op that owns the real estate, but then there's other types of co-ops which is specifically geared towards purchasing real estate. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Good question.
Oh, another question. Do co-ops qualify for grants if they are centered agenda is community?
Do they qualify for grants?
Mm-hmm.
They can get like businesses can qualify for grants. And so they can get grants. They're not a nonprofit, so they're going to pay taxes on those grants. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but yes, they qualify for grants, but they pay taxes on it like a business would.
So the question was like, if let's say if the co-op was to buy a building to be able to provide housing support to teenage moms, and that's the business. You've got the business grants, then you've got the nonprofit grants. I'm just like referencing grants in general. Can co-ops apply? You said co-ops can apply for grants. Is that just business grants or nonprofit grants as well?
It would just be business grants.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just add that if it is a cooperative, it can get funding through philanthropy or like city, etc. too. It depends how your cooperative sometimes is structured. Like I've seen some, for example, that are fiscally sponsored by a nonprofit agent, and so they may be able to access grants from philanthropy. Or sometimes they have, which I don't know if I should be naming this because it also confuses me. They have a nonprofit and then they have the for-profit side. And so that they're able to sometimes use some of that pass through to the for-profit cooperative. So sign up as a for nonprofit 501c3 and then the 308A or 308B for-profit business structure.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I see most often is if you have something like what you just mentioned, you might have a nonprofit because it makes more sense. Because I don't know the business model, but if it's not profitable, then if it's not generating profit, then the co-op may not be the right model. The co-op is a good model for folks that want to work collaboratively. It's not a good model to replace a nonprofit. And so if there's question about whether you'll be generating profit or if you're creating something to the benefit of the community to where the beneficiary, I'm like getting confused, where the beneficiary isn't part of the co-op, that's a nonprofit. In the co-op, the beneficiary is part of the co-op, is a member of the co-op. So there's some difference there.
Got it.
There's another question from Carl. What would be the structure of what would be the structure if you want to have the cooperative? I'm sorry, Carl, maybe you could come off mute and ask.
Yeah, so I was asking what would be the structure if you want to do a cooperative development corporation that starts cooperatives, but is not a cooperative, like it incubates cooperatives.
Mm-hmm. Most of those are nonprofits because it's not profitable. So we are a cooperative developer. We are mostly grant funded. So there's a couple things at play, right? Startups don't usually have money, right? And it's hard to get money for startups. And so that work is subsidized by our funders. And if you're transitioning an existing type of business into a cooperative, it's also pretty expensive. There's legal fees, there's CPA fees, there's the cost of the developer. And what I've seen in my work is that small businesses can't shell out, $25,000, $30,000, $50,000, which is what it costs hour by hour, to make that happen. And so this work tends to be nonprofit work, because we haven't figured out how to make it pay for itself.
Okay, I want to bring another case then. So what if you set up a general benefit corp and you have, I've seen Dazzle do this. They have investor shares. And those investor shares, and then you have the shares for the co-ops that are going to be started. Would those still be considered? Would there still be? Can you do it in that manner without having a nonprofit?
So you would have investor shares, and they would be investing in the.
Oh, I lost you.
Yeah, I think Patty.
Yes.
Maybe have to take a moment to wait for her to come back.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that I think
Investors?
this conversation.
Oh.
I'll
Sorry.
come back. You froze for a second.
Yeah, you can have cooperatives that can take external investment. And so I don't want to get too deep into it. If you want to reach out to me, because I think I heard somebody say like this conversation is going somewhere.
No,
No,
I
we
was
just
just
lost
saying,
But
you.
I
I,
think
Yeah.
yeah.
I was saying I think this is a very very beneficial conversation, especially for the Black community, because a lot of what you're talking about today, for me to have been in the nonprofit and the business community here in Minnesota for 12 years, I I've never heard of a cooperative or corporations being broken down in this manner. And as I'm learning more as you continue to go on, I'm just realizing how many fiscally sponsored organizations become nonprofits because, but their organizations should have been co-ops, and because they wanted to benefit from their initiative, and they had stakeholders and people who would share their responsibility, but that was never given to them as an option. You have so many um, nonprofit organizations who are like the bigger parties who are getting these grants and reaching backwards to Black owned organizations and organizations of color, saying, hey, we'll fiscally sponsor you, we'll help you start your 501c3, but never really putting the other options out there on the table as if to say, this is what we can do. Because most of these Black nonprofit organizations have missions that will help the community, that'll become beneficial, where they can bring residual income to their own families as well as to the people that they're serving. But they don't see that because they didn't know it was an option. So what happens is the actual fiscal sponsor ends up being the ones who benefit financially from
Mm,
the work that the nonprofit or the fiscally sponsored organization is doing in some way, shape, or form down the line. And I just needed to add that. I think this is a very important conversation, like as I'm learning, because we didn't learn about this. My organization, I'm just thinking right now, I'm fiscally sponsored and not a 501c3 because I don't want to not benefit from my own ideas and my own creations that can be financially beneficial, as well as give back to the community. So I just wanted to tell you that I did think that all those
okay.
questions were relevant. Thank
Yeah, yeah. I think, you don't learn about co-ops in school. You don't learn about them in business school. Um, and most people are not familiar with how to use the model. Um, and it's unfortunate. That's part of what we try to do, is make people aware that this is an option. Um, it doesn't make starting a business easier. Um, but it's a pretty flexible model. And it's a good model for, what we call social enterprises, where there's a benefit to the community, but it's a workable working business as well.
I do have another question.
Mhm.
So history in the Twin Cities says that co-ops are one of the fastest way for political power to grow since that happened. So the question is, like, all the food co-ops that are in every single neighborhood in the Twin City that are ran by white organizations, even in North Minneapolis and even in Dayton's Bluff. The question comes to, like, how can Black cooperatives like take a foothold again in these communities, in these neighborhoods, when these are $1 million cooperatives that are not sharing resources, are rarely hiring, are rarely even entering those folks. I don't even think Black people know the membership
Right.
rules or anything like that, because I work in nonprofit space too, and I think churches, mosques, those are the easiest things to transition into co-ops. Well, Black churches have been doing co-ops for generations. So the question is, like, how do we like get this, like, if we start co-ops and people are like, hey, you're just like this strange business, but we need to get like the community educated. How do we get a foothold? Like, how do we like get a stake in the ground? Because it seems just like starting a regular business is insurmountable. And so it's the same thing. The funding sources are shorter.
Mm.
The National Cooperative Association USA is white dominated. Like, how do we get this foothold in this anti-capitalist the world?
There's a couple, that's the big question. I'll say that as a co-op developer, who is often in primarily white spaces, both, co-op developers that are Black, Latino, like we are few and far between. And there's work being, I mean, the conversation exists. I don't have the answer. There's now the Black Cooperators Conference, which is aiming to bring those voices forward and to change the conversation, because it is primarily a white space. It's primarily a space that's dominated by sort of mergers and acquisitions professionals when I go to like ESOP conferences. And so it is, starting to build cooperatives, startups, finding resources to make that easier. Both Minneapolis and St. Paul have funds to start cooperatives, but it's not getting to the people that we want to get them to, right? And so some of it like is getting into the community, and getting into the right communities, so that and community organizations, so that people can hear about what's available to them. I see a question in the chat of, does it cost 25 to 50 to structure? It can. I mean, we're trying to bring those costs down. As I mentioned, we're a nonprofit. We have a sliding scale, but your legal costs are going to be somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000. You can do a lot of that on your own too, if you're, willing to fill out some template bylaws. Some people just like to have the lawyer do it. The city of Minneapolis has the Create Fund with an organization called Shared Capital, and that's up to 25,000 to help with cooperative development. The city of St. Paul, which is somewhere in my presentation, just created a $2.5 million fund, $2.5 million fund, to give grants to startup cooperatives in St. Paul, and Nexus is managing that. And so there's resources, but you're right, the information doesn't get to the right people. Yes, thank you. You can reach out to us at SOC at nexuscp.org. And Leanna or Nikuli can share that. They can share. These are grants. Should I continue going through the presentation, or do we have more questions? Because I made it to like slide 3. All right, let me jump around.
I do have one more question. Sorry.
Sure.
So I run a Black business network here on the East Side, and a lot of the Black businesses are being approached by loan funds right now. What would be the incentive for me to like present to the Black businesses? We have like over 63 that we
Okay.
communicate with. And so what would be the benefit to say, hey, this money that you've been asking for is actually in grants with cooperatives. And so like I know being like from the South, the cooperative members can actually be your family members.
Right.
Right. So they don't always have to be people who are working for you per se. And so would that be would you say is that legal?
It should be open. It should be open to the workers. So it can be your family member if they are workers in the business, but it should be objectively open to the workers. So there should be a path to ownership.
Right.
Um,
So that kind of like gets me into the folk. Like I got a friend who has a clothing store who is him, his fiance, his kids, they all run and work in it. So, but they don't all get a benefit from it. And so the question to me is like, how would we, like, I know we can have a meeting, we can have some seminars, those things can happen, but what would be like the convincing thing to say, hey, we know you've been struggling with this and this is how the grants can help you get to this point.
Yeah.
Like what would be the bottom line for folks?
So there's two things. There's for business owners that have been in business for a while, right? It's an opportunity to exit your business or start to plan your exit. That is sometimes scary to people because they never thought that they would exit their business, or people want their business to go to the next generation. But if that next generation isn't there, or if that next generation is part of the membership, right? It benefits your workers who have helped you build your business. It benefits you because you can exit your business and it'll continue to be, so it keeps your legacy. And there's money to make it happen now. If you are a small business that has been around for 2-3 years, then you're still considered a startup. And in that case, you're bringing in other people to help support you as an owner, to help carry the load. Again, this is sort of the time because money is here now. It won't be there forever. To just have a conversation and explore, what the options are. The cooperative model isn't right for everybody. If you have an owner that likes to do everything on their own and doesn't want to share, no amount of money is going to make them want to share their authority. And so we see it as both an exit strategy for owners that have been there for a long time. Most businesses that go up for sale don't sell. And we're talking mostly here about worker cooperatives. But so most businesses that go up for sale don't sell. Businesses going to the second generation is becoming less common. And so it provides an opportunity for you to sell your business to people that are familiar with your business, that benefit from your business. You have a buyer sitting in your business. And I think for folks starting a business, it's easier to start it with other people, right? And it's a stronger business model. And so, but you also have to recognize that like, not everybody has the same hustle. Not everybody has the same skills, right? Like I can do spreadsheets all day. Put me in front of elected officials and I'm going to drown. And so you want to find someone, if you're starting a business, that has complementary skills, but that is committed. And that is hard. Startups are hard across the board.
I just want to say it's never hard to find people who will be committed. It's hard as Black-owned businesses, even if you're like a startup or been around for, it's hard to find some money.
Yeah.
You know, it's you can find people that are good at everything. It's just the organizations. I heard you when you say people are looking for the people who need it. Where are the people who looking for the people who need it? Because they're the ones with the money. How they I feel like the marketing strategies for organizations or small businesses who can benefit from these funds, they're not marketing it properly because there's so many um startups and small businesses who could benefit from these
Mm-hmm.
opportunities, whether it be a mentorship, funding, or whatever. Is the gatekeeping of the funds is always the problem. Being in this business, I'm the total opposite. I can't sit in front of spreadsheets, but I can sit in a room full of politicians and call bullcrap all day long because the mission is always one thing, but then what are the end results? You'll see what the communities are putting out there and say, hey, we've got this amount of funding for this purposes for co-ops. And they'll say what it's for, and everything's great and hunky dory. But then when it's time for the review is never public. Who benefited? What
Mm-hmm.
startup businesses, how many Black owned businesses was started from this initiative? Where did the remaining amount of funds go? And so that process that we have to go through in order to get those funds, there needs to be like a mentor or something that's with us along the way, because I think it's an unfair advantage to those that's applying for these types of funds who are not familiar whatsoever of the process. So they don't know if the people are really assisting them properly or giving them the maximum amount of benefits that they should receive as a startup business or not. Because once they go through the process, it's like, oh, this is what we'll give you. This is, but then when you go through the process, it's like, well, first you need to structure a business, you need a business plan, and then the prerequisites just to receive the funding is outrageous. The process is going to be a year. They didn't advertise or promote any of that. And so when African American people, when Black people go through this process continuously for years and years and years and years and years,
Yeah.
it's like, what's this? It might be a grand opportunity for you to start a co-op, but it's like, who wants to go through that now? Is it what you say it's going to be? So I think that it's good to have it, but I think there needs to be more clear information, and the information needs to be in environments where they're going to be beneficial, where the people are. If it's for businesses, people should be walking around with flyers going to the business. If you don't communicate or go to lunch or see these people, these Black folks at the conferences, if you're a person that sits in a room full of white people all day long, you're probably not going to run into a Black owned business that can benefit from this opportunity unless you're, boots on the ground where these businesses are, because, it's a beautiful thing. But if we can't benefit, it's like, what are we
Then it's
doing?
useless. Yeah. Then it doesn't help anyone if it's not helping um the folks that you want to. You're right.
I'm excited to hear you move forward and learn more.
All right. Let's see. My mouse died. Where was I? On the benefits. Okay, so let me jump over to worker co-ops. It's a pretty small subset of the economy. There's about 600, but some 6,000 workers work in worker co-ops. And there's sort of bubbles that spring up throughout the country, where I think there's both good cooperative development and capital to support that. So, in order for it to be a co-op, all eligible employees must have a path to membership. And so there's two key words there, right? There's eligible, right? So there is some eligibility criteria that you would develop as if you decide to become a co-op. And that's where that objective piece has to be, right? Usually we see they have to have worked at the business for 6 months or a year. They have to be a worker in good standing. They have to understand the co-op. And so, we're going to give them a little test. They can be, those are the big ones. The way that the co-op works is that members do the day-to-day stuff, right? The day-to-day operations. Membership is voluntary, so not all members need to be, or not all employees need to be members. And then that's where you start to separate the day-to-day, which is your operations, and the governance, which is your long-term outlook, right? And so governance usually happens with a board of directors. And so that can be things like, what is the budget for the year? Are we starting new lines of revenue? It's really focused on policy. We just went through that. There is usually a buy-in, so some amount of money that members will bring to the business. And there's several things that can set that buy-in need, right? If you have a startup, that buy-in might be higher because you need some cash in the business. But ultimately, you, as the founders, will set that buy-in. I've seen it as low as $1. I've seen it as high as $15,000. And so that's a pretty broad range of what your buy-in can be, and it can change over time. But that buy-in is what shows commitment to the business, and it's what keeps people there. There is some risk of losing that buy-in if the business fails, especially if you're going to be borrowing in some future. Banks want to see that the owners put some money into the business. And then we talked about profit sharing. It's usually a formula based on hours worked or production. And so at the end of the year, there's profit in the business that gets divided amongst the workers. So if I worked, twice as much as the next guy, I'm going to get twice as much profit. So with startups, some of the criteria we look for, as you mentioned, we do look for a business plan or projections. We actually, help a lot of businesses put together their business plan and projections because it's not something that people generally carry around in their pocket. They have a sort of business concept. And the reason we look for that business plan is because, again, we can't solve all the problems. Banks are going to look for a business plan. And it helps us assess, whether the business is viable. We look for 3 or more co-founders. We look for a commitment to majority employee ownership. And we do want to see, other partners at the table. We're a small team of 3, so we can't do it all. So we want to see, if there's other business advisors. We can often, go get those people at the table, but we want to make sure that we have a full team so that you are successful. I see some questions in the chat.
Yeah, I could ask mine. So how do you guys, if you say you're getting us to be bank investable, how do you get over the hump of the 51% that all the banks are now saying, like, they've been Old National Bank, Highway Federal, they've been telling all these Black businesses that they want to give them funds now, but they needed to be 51% ownership. That is like very specific in every conversation that I've had. And so, and I have been looking, but there's been, some of those requirements even if the CDFIs are like that too, because they want you to have like a 680 credit score and 51%. Yeah. So like,
Yeah.
I've been looking at that too. Some of the opportunity funds ask for the same thing. So
with the co-op,
33%. Yeah.
Yeah, with the co-op, we do look for the majority of people to be people of color. So we're looking for that. The 51% ownership is built into the co-op model, right? All of the owners are owners, so no one owns more than 20% when you have at least 5 people. And with a co-op, we work with specialized CDFIs that don't require personal credit scores, don't require personal guarantees, because it doesn't make sense when you have a group of, 5 owners. Traditional banks don't lend to co-ops because they can't get a personal guarantee out of you. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
What would be the best way to go about it if the traditional banks aren't going to lend? Where do you go?
So in the Twin Cities, we work with Shared Capital. They're a CDFI. They are a co-op themselves, and they lend to co-ops. And part of the work that they're doing is bringing in other lenders. So when there's a deal that's a good size, over $1 million, then they might bring in other lenders to start to get them comfortable with cooperative lending. There's other national lenders that work with cooperatives that we can work with. Right now, it's not an issue because there's not more co-ops starting than there is funding available. But it's a problem when you only have 5 or 6 lenders across the country, because we want this to flood, right? We want this to be so common that everybody's doing it. But that's part of the work that we as co-op developers have to do, is get traditional lenders, get traditional consultants like in the mix with the co-ops.
Got it. Thank you. So how do we get to co-op? We do training on decision making, on governance. We help you decide who gets to be a member. We help you complete the business plan. We advise on articles and general bylaws. We, advise on capital raising, whether that's GoFundMe, whether that's finding the right lenders. And then once you become a co-op, we like to stay working with you to help you sort of launch and operationalize your business. So we're working with a co-op right now called Future Builders. It's a partnership with Unidos. They'll be providing commercial finishing services, acoustic ceilings, trim and fixtures. They're Latino led. We've been working with them probably for about a year. So they came to us pretty early. Again, if you, it depends on where people are, how long it'll take. So these guys had a concept, but we've been helping them with their business plan. We've been helping them find funding. They're already incorporated. Now they're looking for clients. And so, we work at different stages because what we want is for these co-ops to be successful. So that sometimes does mean that we sort of jump in to do things that are outside of building a co-op.
Okay, I'm gonna skip over this. So I'm gonna skip over the transition piece. And I'll just say that another way to become a co-op is for an existing business to sell the business to its employees. And so what you see here is Happy Earth Cleaning. The owners sold the business to their employees in 2019. They're still in business even after the pandemic. They literally closed their deal December 31st, 2019, and you were around for March 2020. They had a pretty hard time, but made it through and are still functioning. And so real estate investment cooperatives, this is where community members and tenants organize to co-own real estate. So moving away from worker co-ops. It's typically commercial or mixed use, and it's used to provide affordable and stable locations for businesses and organizations. So that's the difference there between a housing and a real estate investment cooperative. And so to the question earlier, a co-op, a worker co-op can own real estate. That's not a real estate investment cooperative. What makes it a real estate investment cooperative is that there's several owners who are members of the community. Owners can be entities or they can be individuals, but the underlying asset or the thing that generates profit is that real estate. The members buy a share of common stock, usually somewhere in the $500. These tend to be lower because you have more members. This gives them their vote as shareholders, and it also gives them access to additional preferred shares. So preferred shares exist both in worker co-ops and real estate investment co-ops. And that's an opportunity for you to bring additional investment that has different dividends, it has different ways of making money. But it's a good way to raise money as well. Democratically controlled. Benefits of local real estate ownership, anti-displacement, it decreases extraction, stability, affordability, local control, and wealth building, right? So just like you have all of these real estate prospectors and people making money off of your rent, you know, this means that, I mean, someone's still going to be making money, but they're a member of the community, and presumably they're doing this to keep things affordable and not continue to raise real estate prices. Okay, I'm going to stop there because I see a lot of chatter in the chat, but that might just be Nikuli. Can you scale fast with worker-owned co-ops? I don't see it as something that would stop you from scaling. I'm gonna think about that. Yeah, it's not something that inherently is going to stop you from scaling, but I think you want to think clearly about how you will compensate the people who are there early, because they're going to do a lot more work than the people that come in, you know, when the company starts to hit profitability. Is this a PIPCLT? So not exactly. So I'm not super familiar with community land trust, but community land trust is held in a trust in perpetuity. Usually there's a mission attached to that trust that doesn't let it be sold. You can sell a real estate investment cooperative. All of the members have to agree to it. And so on a spectrum, right, you have your regular real estate on this side, and then you have your community land trust on this side. Your real estate investment cooperative is somewhere around here. Any other questions? This is the question and answer portion. Real estate investment trust. I would assume so, yeah. Nikuli, I see you shaking your head, so you may know more about this than I do.
I was just saying yes, it is. So
Okay.
we can talk more about it because I know Patty's
Okay.
time is, we can talk more about it, Queen, after the break. Patty's here and there's so many good questions. So I want to make sure I lend all those
Yeah.
to her.
I specialize in worker ownership, so we do both, but my counterpart, Benjamin, wasn't able to attend today, and he mostly deals with the real estate. So what kind of cooperatives are you all starting? Ask you questions since you have or what kind of businesses are you starting or working on?
I wasn't expecting you to ask me that question while I snuck in the kitchen to make some coffee, but I'll be happy to tell you. Okay, so I am starting a business. It's called Journey Home, and these kids, it's a lot of kids who don't have no place to live, and the foster homes, they don't have enough Black foster parents, so there's nowhere for these kids to go, and so I don't want it to be a nonprofit because I don't want to give all my ideas over to somebody else who can just take it and run with it the way that they do politics and all that with nonprofits. So when you start talking about the co-op, I'm like, I love to work in community spaces. I like working with other people. So I'd rather get together with like-minded people who likes to give back to young people, right? Who wants to invest in this girl home or this girl boy group home setting and be able to offer more housing support. And then it's profitable because the state will contract with your business, for placement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And so you could do a couple things, right? I mean, you can have the workers be members of the co-op, but you can also have the tenants be members of the co-op in some way, right? So then there's additional benefit to them. So you can have different types of membership in a co-op. So you might have, the workers, you might have the tenants, you might have some other community members or community organizations be members of the co-op. So there's different ways to structure it. And yeah, again, I think if you have a profitable business model, there's no reason to be a nonprofit. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been in business for 12 years. I have a workshop that I've created that I volunteer and I teach the workshop. It's a life skills workshop that I later found out once, different other businesses and nonprofits wanted to access my services. And they will offer to like pay me because they assumed that I was a business versus a fiscally sponsored organization that was just volunteering my time, when we didn't have grant funding.
Yeah.
That's when I realized, and then a business mentor told me, that's marketable, like that's profitable work that you're doing. You need to package that workshop, build a catalog. You need to be selling that idea and making a profit from that business. So this 12-year fiscally sponsored organization that's geared toward teaching life skills to teenage youth is what I've been doing, and the way that we've raised funds, because getting grants, applying for grants and being selected through the grant process as a single Black low-income business owner, we don't get selected for grants. I've had one grant in 12 years, two grants, less than 10,000 in 12 years. And so our biggest source of income was just raising money. Fundraising has been our biggest way of being able to fund the organization. And thank goodness we're very successful at that, very skilled at fundraising. It's our thing to do. It gets the job done. When we have a mission for Juneteenth, for Black History Month, for every single month, there's, we throw parties, safe environments for the kids to express themselves with their friends. So for Valentine's Day Bash, Halloween Bash, Summer Jam, having different celebrities come out, fundraising, and we use those funds to give back when we're having our leadership opportunities. But while doing this work, a lot of the youth are at-risk youth in foster care, and we noticed the biggest issue with them outside of doing advocacy work, our life skills program, and then doing the advocacy work, somewhat just being an advocate to the family as far as connecting them to community resources and advocating on their behalf when there's confrontations in school or any type of discrepancies, discrimination within the community for Black people or people of color who are working a job and feel discriminated against, youth who are in school who are discriminated against, because the NAACP doesn't represent our community very well in my area. So point is, the fiscally sponsored organization hasn't been doing so well as a fiscally sponsored organization because it's more so on the lines of politics and nonprofit. And our biggest issue is we need profit, and the work that we're doing is profitable, but the resources are scarce. The gatekeeping is real. And I just think that with us being a cooperative versus being a nonprofit, I just don't want to be a nonprofit because I just don't like the idea of giving my idea away to a board of directors and then they can just shut me out. I'd rather make it a business and allow like-minded people like my volunteers and mentors and alumni who've graduated our workshop to become members of the cooperative and be able to step back and share leadership opportunities with those who have benefited from the program and those who are invested in the program through as mentors and such.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense. If you want to talk more, I'm happy to talk more if you are thinking you want to become a co-op sometime soon.
Absolutely. I'm gonna call you.
Yeah.
Well, we have a grocery store that I've been playing around with about making it a co-op. So we've had that since 2019. Been a solo entrepreneur. The reason I've gotten the co-op, the thoughts around co-op was because I was tired of being a solo entrepreneur. And I'm getting more and more tired. So we have created we have a coffee shop that's been doing really well, and we were ready to scale that to another neighborhood, and we're about to open that this summer coming up. And then I'm just a serial starter. I start a lot of things, and so the thing is, I want to scale the coffee shops because we're doing something a little bit different. We want a zero waste coffee shop that has the lowest emission rating in the city, and so that's the point. And then we do workforce development around the food industry, and so our goal was to take our participants, as hopefully all of them in this next cohort will want to start their own cooperative business together. And so we just wanted to start pushing that mindset early on.
Yeah.
As we do these we do our workforce development cohorts, which is paid, and then hiring. So me and my wife have just been talking about like investing a large chunk into the grocery store over this next 6 months, and then just like going hard to scale.
Yeah.
There's like 3 or 4 cities that have reached out to us about opening up a store, and we just haven't seen the numbers that we want to see here in the Twin Cities. And so that's the number one. We don't want this one to close and we open up 5 more outside the city. So
Right.
that's the main thing. We want this to continue to be the flagship. And so that's the one thing that we do. We got a wonderful store, wonderful coffee shop here. And then we're just in the east side, like just trying to get that marketable again.
Yeah.
But this is what I'm passionate about doing. Opening up Black coffee shops across the United States. There's only
Amazing.
4 Black coffee shops in the Twin Cities that are known about, and then there's only 6 within the St. Paul area.
Okay.
So I think that's one of the biggest things. And we have a heart to go to places where people don't have food sovereignty and create co-ops with them.
Yep.
We had talked about buying some farmland in Puerto Rico and actually turning it over to the citizens within 5 years. So that's been our big venture, and that's why cooperatives are really important to us. That's why we created a development court, so we could do
Yeah.
all this without hindrance.
How can we support?
Yeah, I'm writing my business plan, rewriting my business plan right now for the model. And so it was easier when it was just the grocery store, but now I'm doing
There's a lot.
it's like yeah. So now there's the ecosystem, which has been working. Well, this is the prototype that we've developed. So we'll do it. We actually got our building already for the next coffee shop ecosystem over in North End. And so we're excited about that. So help with the business plan. I'm ready to go full co-op if I can see the numbers right.
Okay.
And then we're ready to invest our portion and see who else ready to invest. That's how you can help. We can set up a meeting.
Okay.
Talk. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, you all, I have to go. I just saw the time. Sorry. Yes, let's set up a meeting. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Patty, for staying longer, answering our questions, and just sharing. This is clearly, a really important conversation and topic. So we appreciate your
Yeah.
time.
Lively group. I wasn't sure when you were going through the review if people were going to speak up, but this is great.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, Patty.
Bye.
All
All
right.
Go ahead.
No, so we can transition to our break. So we'll be back 12:25 Central Time. So yeah, we're just gonna go right into the break, and hopefully, in the afternoon, we'll have more time to do some more reflecting in smaller and large groups. So
Yeah.
we'll see you all shortly.
I was just gonna say we're gonna be doing more of an activity in the next round, so like the development timeline. So I think we can also we'll talk to Liana, but try to figure out how to alter some of that to make more space for conversation for folks that want to maybe chime in or talk or speak in a different way. So we'll figure that out during the break. So we'll see you shortly. Take some time, have some food, some sustenance, and we'll be back.
What time are we coming back? What time are we coming back?
So it'll be 12:25.
25.
Yep. All right.
I know a lot of people left for lunch. I'm hoping some folks come back. But if you are back on the Zoom, can you just give us like an emoji or hi or something in the chat? Thank you. All right, as folks maybe start to come back, we'll maybe start with so Patty had a lot to share. I learned a lot of things, and there was also some really great discussion. So what we're hoping to do is do small group breakouts and then maybe come back. But since there are 1, 2, 3, 4 of us on Zoom right now, we'll just do that. Yeah, and just shift as we need to. So, is there anything that came up for anyone while Patty was sharing and as folks were asking questions about some of the information that was shared?
This is Aini. I Before I started this program, I had limited understanding about co-ops. I always assumed co-ops are non-profit, but it's made clear today that um, it is a business category, and it can make profits. Yeah, there are different kinds of co-ops, obviously. So that is kind of striking to me. That's what I learned so far, new.
I'm glad. And Aini, do you see any connections with like Broadband Coalition and some of the work that you're doing there?
Be more specific. Do I see any?
So you said that today you are you found out that cooperatives are businesses and so much nonprofits. So as you look at the cooperative that you are all running, Black Brown Coalition, are you seeing some alignment in the cooperative work?
Yeah, I do know that broadband has the profit orientation and community service. But it wasn't clear to me as it is today.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's, I'm gonna mute you a second, sorry. But yeah, I think because there are a lot of utility cooperatives and your cooperative specifically is thinking about like internet utility. So there is a profitability in there too, but I think that's really interesting. I'd be really interested to see to how you all develop your cooperative and what else you see. Yeah. Anyone else? We're just for folks just joining us, we're just kind of debriefing and having some debriefing from the time with Patty. Just asking for folks like what came up for you? Is there anything new? Is there anything that you're connecting to your cooperative work? Please feel free to like respond in the chat. I like the discussion of gatekeeping. Yes. Would you like to talk more about that? I know as artists, you probably have so much to teach us from your experience too.
Yeah, this is Amaranthia here. We're both here today, but we just have our camera off because we're eating. But yeah, for years we've had difficulty with getting grants. And then when we created our project Sister Creatives Rising, where we help marginalized artists, marginalized women, mostly women of color, queer folks of color who are gender nonconforming, we found it was very difficult to get grants. And we still got grants in the end last year, but we had to get a fiscal sponsor with an organization that is white led, but they work with minority artists. But a lot of the work we do is focused on also disability justice, because a lot of the artists we work with are also disabled, and we're disabled as well. So the fiscal sponsor didn't quite align with the disability justice work that we do. and that they weren't that accessible to the disability community. And so we're like now in that space of trying to figure out what's a better fiscal sponsor that we can work with that more aligns with what we're doing and understands it more, because that's the direction that we're going in. And we also applied for a grant that was a $5,000 grant. The majority of the funds that we've received has been like 1,500 or under that. So we tried this $5,000 grant that was for disabled artists, and we did like, what was it, like a pretty long discussion with the person who was leading it, totaling to about 2 hours. We had two 1-hour discussions with them. They're like, yeah, everything that you're doing fits. You have great examples of the work. You've shown success with it. Because we put together these documentaries telling these stories of these artists. And then we submitted and they said, yeah, you're a great fit. Everything looks very tight. We're so excited to look through this. A lot of people aren't submitting properly. But then they kept giving us information that didn't really make sense. Like what they were telling us over the phone didn't match what we were seeing in the application. And so we kept saying, well, what you're saying here doesn't make sense here. And they were like, well, just put this here. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go closer to what the application says. And then I just got really confused. And then we didn't receive the grant and we were basically told that we weren't a fit. And we're like, so we spent all this time, like time and energy doing these 2 hour long discussions, being told, yeah, everything is a fit. We really like what we're doing. We really want to give you a high chance of receiving this grant. And to be told that we're not a fit in the end, I'm like, well, what was the point? Because we could have been just told that from the beginning. And the majority of these disability grants, I don't know about this one, but a lot of them go to white disabled folks. So it's not going to the Black disabled community. And as a result, I see a lot of Black disabled folks, including ourselves, having to get a fiscal sponsor who is more aligned or just fundraise. So it's a very frustrating process. I think we're very lucky that we were able to get sponsors who understood it, but a lot of times we would go into communities and they didn't get it. They didn't understand how we were doing that intersection of disability and the arts from a Black perspective, from a BIPOC perspective. So that's why I forgot who brought it up, but I just like that discussion of the gatekeeping. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Nashana, Carl, or maybe Nashana brought up and Carl seconded. Yeah. And I think too, there's like, I think what we've also seen with like funding structures, there's this idea of like where they feel like people should be, and you have to match that idea. So like and there's no like visioning beyond like what these boxes that they have, especially for like Black, Indigenous, communities, POC communities, etc. And so, yeah, I think the funding structures are really interesting, but also just like so disheartening at times. So Nexus is an intermediary. And so in the past, we've done regrants. We're like pausing for a year or two for some restructuring. But like even in our process, we have tried to like we can't we're still a nonprofit. So there are things that, still happen that maybe are hard, but like we've tried to like basically learn from our experience as an organization and try not to put that on our grantees. So like long application processes, not really clarity of if you're getting funding or not funding. It's like very much relationship based, but even that I think limits to the amount of people we fund, which is why we're trying to figure out this restructure as well. So yeah, there's a lot. I think there's a lot of like these weird complex layers when it comes to funding and this gatekeeping piece. But also the fact that organizations oftentimes have to be fiscally sponsored to even maybe have a chance to even get access to grants, or become a nonprofit to even get access to grants. And oftentimes too, it'll be like, well, you have to be a 501c3 straight, and there's like all of those. I hear that frustration, and yeah. Yeah. Queen, I saw you come off to camera. Do you have anything? Some reflections?
Yeah, I did like the clarity around like the worker one and the real estate one. Just because like with what I'm working on, it could be both. And I shared that with you. And the idea around banking, because as a former banker, is like, how do you get all these people who own this to have a bank account? So that was good to know about banking, and the resources that she did mention, as far as like to get help funding the structuring, because I don't really know like the structuring of the co-op process, so that it's easier to communicate that to people who are interested in memberships and stuff like that. So that was like mostly what I wrote down, like the framework and stuff. Real estate. So yeah, I learned about the real estate investment co-op option. So I like that after I do what I need to do first.
Yeah, and there's so many examples here in the Twin Cities I put in the chat. Like, so there's the one that everyone talks about is NEAS, which is the Northeast Investment Cooperative Enterprise, well, real estate co-op, and they like bought a bakery, the bike store, and I think it's Fair State or Fair, I don't know, it's a brewery. And then they also have another one with commercial space, but we've all been learning from them. Because then there's also Midway Investment Cooperative, which is, I think, more BIPOC majority, and they're working on investing in commercial and like, what is it when it's not commercial? My brain is like leaving me today, but like home ownership and commercial real estate. And then there's Taproot, which I'm a part of. I'm the vice president for that one. And that one is mostly commercial real estate for artists to like maintain affordability in like this industrial section from like 280 to like wherever Menards is. And so we're currently in the process of buying a building. We did have a fall through last year. Like this work is so hard, and capitalism is capitalism, but we're supposed to buy the Can Wonderland building, which is like, and then that fell through, so we're buying a different building. And then there's NICE MN, which is the North Side Investment Cooperative Enterprise, and they're working on commercial and like housing real estate. And there, I think all of those memberships vary too. I mean, Patty talked about like $1 to 15,000. I think NICE MN is like $50. Midway is 250, Taproot is 1,000 with scholarships and so forth. So there's also like those varying factors as well. So yeah. Yeah, what else came up for folks before we cut? I just wanted to make space, for some discussion or some questions before we move into the next part. For anyone joining us, I was just making space for some questions and more discussions from part one. So just opening it up for 1 or 2 last questions. Okay. All right, we'll move forward with the last portion of the day. And I think Liana is introducing that one. So I'll turn it over to Liana.
Thank you. All right, so we'll be closing our time going through the development timeline. So this is kind of steps around creating a co-op and that co-op development. So I'm gonna share a link in the chat of what we'll be working with. And we'll put you all in smaller groups right now, just because we have, folks representing one co-op or two. We'll probably do maybe 2 or 3 small groups just to kind of go deeper. But essentially, there are different steps on each slide if you have clicked on the link. And as a group, you'll have about, thank you, 20 minutes or so to kind of go through each and kind of decide for yourself, maybe looking at your own co-op, or just how you would maybe order these different steps in the cooperative development timeline, because we know that different things might work for different groups depending on, where you're at in this work. And so just having some time to really sit with the things talked about this morning, and also just where you all are in your journeys of developing a co-op, to really figure out maybe as a group how you might order it, maybe as a co-op how you would order it. So it's just a kind of time to be interactive and examine for yourselves. So yeah, the exercise will take about 20 minutes or so. But you all will be coming up with an order that works for you in your cooperative group for how you might go about these different steps. And we will give you kind of cues on how much time is left. So about halfway through, we'll let you know 5 minutes and then 2 minutes. And then after we have that 20 minutes to really go through, we'll come back as a large group and each group can share kind of what order, and it might be different. There might be different orders within each group. So just honoring the different orders, we'll propose an order that was given, but we know that that might be different. So we'll just have some large group time after to really discuss how each group came up with their order or different orders, and then do some further takeaway and discussion.
Question. Are we going to be doing mock businesses, our own businesses, or
For your own, yeah. So because a lot of folks here are one person representing the co-op group, I'm thinking it might be nice to kind of talk about what makes sense for where y'all are at. So you want to bring in your own experience of where you're at in the journey. So it's fine if, there's 2 of you or 3 of you and y'all all have different orders. Like if there were more people in the same group, we would split you up by a group to really go deep as a group. But right now, since we have different people representing different groups, we know that might be different. So really want to think about where you are in your cooperative journey for this particular cooperative that you are forming right now. So that's kind of why I offer there might be different orders shared even in the same discussion. Like y'all might have different ideas, but just want to welcome like different places that you might be in the journey and just different reasons why it might be a different order. So I hope that makes more sense.
And before we go into groups, I just want to get a sense how comfortable people are using Jamboard. I know we've used it. Yes, we're doing this on Jamboard. So the link is in the chat. And I'll pull it up just one more time. So on Jamboard, just as a reminder, first of all, you can reorder the cards by like moving them around if you need to. So, but that's how you reorder them. For some groups, they find that they might want to repeat steps. Like I said, this is like Leona said, this is a very creative process. So you get to figure out like what's best for your cooperative work. So if you feel like you wanted to double up on a slide, you just double click on it and add duplicates or delete it. So I'll just duplicate governance because maybe you might want to establish governance structures twice or something. And then if you want to add notes to the slides themselves, on the left-hand side, there are sticky notes. So you can put whatever sticky note you want in there. You can select pictures from Google or your own photos if you want to put something more representative there. Or you can even add a text box to put some notes. So I hope. Is anyone not comfortable using Jamboard? We'll also hop in the different groups as you go along to offer more support as well.
So in the groups, are we working on our own cooperatives? Or are we working on cooperatives together, like when we go into the Jamboard?
Yeah, so ideally, like how we've done this in the past, and I know a lot of people are out because of different circumstances right now. So what we would have done is each cooperative group would have been grouped together. So and then they would have basically worked through the steps to figure out like how they want to develop their cooperative. And then what we would have done is for groups that are like by themselves, like Carl and Lashana, like we would have put you two together, knowing that you're working on different projects. So essentially, I'm inviting you will be, different groups will be represented. You all are working on your own cooperative work, but you all have access to the Jamboard. So your order, let's say Carl and Ashana are in a group, your order might be different based on what you need in your cooperative group, but just talking through that with your partner and like ordering them on the Jamboard as best that fits for Carl, as best that fits for Queen Edrins, INE with Black Broadband Coalition, etc. Is that clear?
It is.
Okay. And then, so I'm gonna put everyone in groups, and then I'm gonna meet with Anthony just to give that update again, once people are in groups. I hope that's okay. So Anthony, we're gonna be sending people to groups. When it's sent to group, just don't go yet so that we can talk through what's coming up next for us.
Okay.
And whenever you're ready. Oh no, did you come back too fast?
It was just getting into a good part.
Oh no, it's always like that, isn't it? Did you have good discussion?
Got something rolling.
Got something rolling?
It was amazing.
Yeah, and you could
Yeah,
use
good
this
idea.
Sorry.
You got a really good idea.
And yeah, you guys can use this anytime if you need to go back to it. If you reach a stage and you're like, let me revisit. So the cards are at your disposal to keep mulling through them. All right, everyone, welcome back.
Hello.
Not enough time. Is that like a consensus? Okay.
Got you and give us like 30 minutes. Did we have that long?
20.
20, yeah. 10 minutes
20.
left.
What are some first initial takeaways from the activity? And feel free to unmute, put it in the chat, whatever you need to do.
Well, one thing I realized is that it's easier to work with a group. I'm so used to working by myself. So working with a group is different, but it's fun because everybody's mind is centered on like one thing. And when you're thinking about the structure of a business, it didn't go the way that I thought that it goes. It goes a different way. So
Yeah, for sure. Working in a group is easier. It also presents complex challenges, which we'll talk about like later when we talk about conflict resolution. But yeah, it's really nice not to have to be by yourself and have other people to also bounce ideas out of, or just create this beautiful open box to really get creative with whatever you're doing. Was you were thinking about these different cooperative journeys and all these plans, did anything resonate for your cooperative work? Did anything not resonate for your cooperative work?
I guess for me, I would say that I did not implement a lot of these different structures in my organization in the early parts of me running my business. And I wish I had the knowledge I do now. It would have made my job a lot easier as a business owner. Those steps are really, really important. And I think that all business startups, regardless if you're going to be a co-op, an LLC, a nonprofit, I think it's really, really important to become educated on the business and the different opportunities that are available, the different ways to structure your business or structure your organization and things like that before just going out there. So many of us are so passionate about the things that we do, and we just kind of just jump out there and start doing the work without really understanding the dynamics behind how the business is actually structured. And then it doesn't get done right because we're splitting ourselves between actually doing the work and taking care of the business because we don't have enough income for the business or the organization to be able to cover the administrative portion as well as the leadership portion. A lot of that stuff is done by one or two people, and if we're successful in the leadership part, we're probably slacking on the administrative part and vice versa. So I think the biggest thing is to my biggest takeaway is just to know the way that you want your business to be structured, and getting a lot of those steps done and completed prior to going out there to do the work. So for startups that are not yet fiscally sponsored, who are not incorporated, my advice would be, go through slides like this and really look at how your business should be structured and try to take care of as much of that information as you can, because it's really going to help you understand how you want your business to be structured, and it's going to prevent you from running into a lot of hiccups later on throughout the course of your business that is going to stagnate your business's growth in the future.
I see. Thank you so much for sharing. I see in the chat, Carl, the idea is a scalable and highly investable. Models are very innovative, and then entrepreneur, manager, and technical employee. Which parts of that was that referring to?
So I think in most businesses, we try to be all three of those people: the entrepreneur, the manager, and the technical employee, because we feel like we got the technical skill to do a lot of the things. And I think that's why co-ops like break those things down. And so that way they make them more successful. And I think when people think of co-op, they only think of like two co-ops, like grocery stores and real estate. And so like for like when I heard Queens co-op, it was like really innovative to me, like wellness coaches having property and land to do retreats and all the other streams of income that could come in and the benefits that can come out of it. I thought that's where co-ops like breathe life for me. We get to hear about different businesses that would not normally be heard, and we get to hear from other people. So I think that's the innovation part, is like seeing that co-ops can be a lot as a broad term that we can all use to see our ideas come to life.
Yeah, absolutely. For anyone, was there any particular phase that you felt excited undertaking? Or were there any phases that you felt a little more anxious about and feel like you need more conversation?
For me, I was not sure what we were evaluating, which step, which phase, which I wasn't sure about where that should go. What am I doing? What am I evaluating when there is nothing there yet? Am I evaluating the marketing? Am I evaluating the idea? Am I evaluating the governing, the management? No, so that was, I was in the air about that. I wasn't quite sure about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We had to put that slide.
Yeah, so it could be different. I think I mentioned like you could have evaluation 50 times. And I said this because last year when we did this with a group, they would literally they felt like they had an idea, evaluate, market research, evaluate, feasibility, evaluate. And so for that cooperative group, they felt like evaluation was an important step after like any achievement. For your co-op group, evaluation could be either in the beginning, in the middle, or the end. It really depends on like what you need. So it could be that maybe you're working on building trust and getting organized, And then you want to evaluate that step to see maybe what worked well with your group, what didn't work. Were you able to build trust successfully with the people that you want to be in your cooperative? So it really depends. I will say that for this cooperative development timeline, it's meant to work so that there are no wrong, there is no right order. The order is very much dependent on your cooperative and what you need. So that's why I even said that maybe for Carl, the idea comes first, and maybe for Anthony, getting organized comes first. So this is really dependent, and it might change. It might be that you start your cooperative and you feel like the idea, building trust, visibility are like the first steps. And then you really get into the work, and 6 months later, you feel like you need to reorder the steps. So it's just meant to be something that you always have as a tool as you develop your cooperative to figure out like which step you are at, and if you need to change things around, reorder things, duplicate things, or get rid of things. Maybe you don't want to do evaluation. Maybe that's not a value add for your co-op, and so maybe you can think about something else. So yeah, I get that you don't know where it's supposed to be, but it's really up to your cooperative where you feel like you'd like to add it or not add it. Yeah.
I don't have a hand raised. I don't know how to find my hand raised. I don't want you guys to think I'm being rude, but I don't know how to raise my hand on this computer I'm on. I just wanted to say too that I was a part of this cohort called You Lead, and it's kind of like a leadership forum where they teach you board governance, how to be a board member, how boards are structured. And so that part was more, I wouldn't say difficult, but it is still something that I think a lot of businesses and organizations, especially Black ran organizations, should do more research on the different types of boards. Because when the lady was mentioning having the board, the members, executive director, things like that, a lot of people don't realize that a board is not just simply a board with like 5 or 6 people. Like you can decide if it's going to be a working board, if it's going to be a voting board, if it's, there's different type of boards. Just like the co-ops are different, the board structures are different, even the members are different in their responsibilities. So I think this was a really good breakdown, but just so people know, it's broken down even more than this. And that's why I think, it's important to really, really, really do your homework, because one thing she mentioned, I don't know if you guys caught on, but she said board members can be entities, or enterprises instead of individuals. Like another corporation can be a board member versus an individual. So let's say my best friend, who's a lawyer, is a member, and then my pastor's a board member as well. But then if this person is an enterprise, let's say Target can be a board member and represent as Target, and the person who is the board member that's doing the voting is only voting as a representative of the corporation. It breaks down a lot more. So people just got to do their homework into it.
Yeah, and also figure out like how you want to structure it. Like I shared for like Taproot Co-op, for our boards, it's individuals, but for like memberships, we have like individual memberships and business memberships. So like Line Break Media, Terra Firma, all these businesses are also members. So it really depends on how you structure this. And also should be written in your bylaws and governance, which we're going to talk about more later. Patty earlier did talk about the setting up bylaws and governance for the cooperative, because that basically tells you like what the rules, structures are for the cooperative. And so if I were to enter, I don't know, anyone's co-op, I would essentially have a guidance of like what I need to follow to be part of that cooperative, or what is not possible versus what is possible. So adding all of what you said, Nishana, to the governance, to the bylaws pieces too, as you're establishing the cooperative. Anything else? Any other, and if you haven't talked, I invite you to come into the space and give whatever you're thinking too.
The last thing, can you send us like an email or drop a link on some resources, where we can go become more educated, get more information, or specifically find an organization or business that will mentor us or help us to establish a lot of this stuff.
Like, you mean like the develop like the plans? Yeah, so we do it. So, okay. This was supposed to be for later, but I can share now. So, one of the things I will be sending out to everyone is essentially like a booking link to set up some time to talk with me and Liana, just to check in about like where you are, how the cohort is doing, how you're feeling, and what you need. And so, for some of these things, we can talk through them. And if we don't have the expertise, we definitely connect with our colleagues at the Shared Ownership Center. So Patty, Christina, and Benjamin. And then if we don't have that in Nexus, we can like offer a resource outside of the organization. So either the speakers that come here. So in 2 weeks for our next session, we have I've invited Mavry Davis from Ajani Cooperative, and also he has his own business in West Virginia, but he does like business planning for cooperatives. So like if that's the step you need, then you can connect with him further to talk about that. As we go more deeper into other topics, governance, bylaws, the finance pieces, we're all bringing speakers for that. So if you feel like you want to connect more with them, you could do that too. We can certainly create some kind of a resource list. There was one that I created a few years ago. I think it's outdated at this point, but I'll also share later on the Nexus website, there's a consulting directory. So you could also figure out like if you want a consultant based on like what your needs are, you can connect via there if we can't offer that resource. So yeah, I'll add that link soon. So anything else in terms of this cooperative development timeline that you feel like worked well? Maybe if folks are okay sharing, where do you feel like you are right now in your cooperative development? Like which step or which phase are you in right now?
We're raising funds right now. That's the phase we're in, and based off our journey's individual plan, fundraising would be towards the end of our slide after we've already built structure and everything else. So yeah, the fundraising part.
Thank you. Marinthia and Claire.
So right now we're in the space where we're about to give funds to the community. We're getting ready to do our micro grants in March to artists. So we're going to give out 200 fundraising last year. Yeah, we did the fundraising last year with our film event, and then we're going to do 7 $200 grants. Women of color and femmes of color. So we're going to do that, and then right now we're trying to figure out, we're kind of doing evaluation. We're trying to figure out now like how we're going to move forward with making a regular source of income while managing being disabled. Because my mom has her oncology appointments and I'm dealing with my health issues, and we take care of each other. So we're trying to figure out what's the best way to do that. And we met with one of our sponsors yesterday, and we're trying to create a plan with them with like finding that new fiscal sponsor, finding new sources of funding through grants and workshop, getting workshop. Yeah, trying to figure out like how we're going to do workshops this year, doing the trying to see if we can do, because we have our documentary that's submitted to the film festivals now, so we're waiting to hear from them. And so we're trying to figure out if we can use the documentary like as it's kind of a memoir type thing. If we can use the documentary as like which
Like-
is telling her cancer journey.
telling my cancer journey. So
Yeah.
using it like how you would use a book, like how you have a book and you go to reading, using the documentary like that,
Mm-hmm.
and do a showing and then have a talk around the documentary about the stuff that's talked about in the documentary.
Yeah, the healing arts and
Healing
disability
Medical
accessibility,
racism.
medical racism, and how we can give those like resources to the communities who are experiencing this, and give them a space to be able to tell their stories and feel like solidarity,
Mm-hmm.
and in turn give them like tools
Yes.
on how they can self-advocate and use
Mhm.
arts as a healing tool, like how we have
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because a lot of
from the disabled, from the lens of like this
exactly
disabled.
because like
person
a
of
lot of
color.
the stuff as
Yeah.
I'm still on this cancer journey and stuff, so a lot of stuff I do is advocating to get here. And how do you do that? How, as a Black female, how do you do this advocacy in a healthcare system that is up against you? Like I just had to go get a bone marrow test done, and I had to advocate every single thing about what type of mask I wanted them to wear. So talking about this, how do we tell people that it's very important to do these things? Because sometimes people think that the doctors will do these things, and you really have to advocate for yourself, especially if you're a Black person, Black female,
Yeah.
or Black person.
Yeah, and so
So all this
managing that while using the art as the in-between
Mhm.
to manage the stress and anxiety
Mhm.
of that. So that's the space we're in right now.
I think Nashana was saying that in the chat, they'd love to connect. Oh, wait, I thought I saw it in the chat.
Oh yeah.
Carl,
I
is
meant to send her a direct message. I just sent it to her directly. Sorry.
Okay.
it's okay.
I just saw it.
That's great.
Yeah. I'll send you our email. We'd love to connect.
On our website.
Yeah, okay. And yeah, we do right now. I see the message from Carl about funding. We received some grants last year, and we just got our final grant that came in from last year. Came in a bit late, so we just like got it in January, and so we just used it to get some equipment. So now we're trying to figure out, okay, what's the next steps with like what can we apply for with grants?
Yeah, and
Here for funding.
yeah, and we're gonna be getting out there and trying to get on podcasts and stuff to let people know that these grants are coming up so people can apply for them.
Yeah. So right now it's really, we've used up the grant for the equipment, so we're trying to figure out how we can bring in funding again, so we can just keep going.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Are you, what part of the city are you guys in?
We're in New Hampshire.
Oh, you're in New Hampshire. You're in a
Yeah,
totally different state.
and our work is virtual because of our
Yeah.
health issues. So everything is virtual, so that makes it even tougher sometimes.
Yeah, there's not really a lot of stuff in New Hampshire. It's mostly for white people here. So
Yeah. So a lot of work that we do is outside of New Hampshire. And we've worked with people in as far as Thailand.
well, not Thailand,
Indonesia, I'm sorry.
and Egypt and Australia.
Egypt, Australia.
Great, thank you all for sharing.
Sure.
Twin Cities impact match. Where do you all feel like you are in your development?
Well, I feel like we're at the point where we really need to focus on like funding more, getting more funding and more grants in. So that's our next phase as far as where we're at. We have a location, we're looking for a vehicle. So we're kind of a little bit everywhere. And just getting clients in and waiting on licensing from the state, stuff like that. So that's pretty much where we are. It's just like a bit of a waiting game and trying to make sure all of our ducks are in a row. Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much, Mitch. Our Black House.
I guess just looking for already established somewhat. Just in governance and funding.
Everyone is in the funding or the raising capital stage at some point or another, huh?
What'd you say?
I'm saying everyone here seems like raising capital is a never-ending endeavor.
Oh,
Oh, Anthony, I saw you come on camera. Was it something else as well?
Uh, Not really. Just trying to get things censored. We have like a deadline to make too, so that's another reason why we're kind of our deadline is like June or July. We're trying to get everything done by our deadline, basically. We have about 5 months or so left. Yeah. Other than that, not much.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Leon, I know this is part of I feel like I just turned into a big group discussion for the most part. But I just wanted to say that, yeah, I hear you all. I hear the different stages. I was always here. I feel like every year there's this constant ask for like what funding looks like for this work, and also like, you know, especially when funding structures don't often recognize this work or don't see and value this work in the way that it should be. And so I guess that's what I'm hearing and holding right now. Maybe this is a good time to share this. Well, I'll share it in a second, but yeah, so that's what I'm hearing. The development timelines are there for you to use at any part of your cooperative journey. So I hope you'll go back to them. Like I said, play around with them, figure them out. Whether you do decide to go full co-op or you decide, I don't know, nonprofit, LLC, whatever you decide to do, that's like a tool and a resource to use. While I can't really answer the big funding question, because I'm always asking that, I'm happy to share some of the resources that were shared, like Shared Capital, Seed Commons, my gosh, which I know this kind of, there's a limitation here because I feel like I know the resources in Minnesota, St. Paul, well, Minnesota. And so sometimes, I'll have to go back and look for some of those resources too in New Hampshire to see what else to share out. But Propel Nonprofit has been a really, they have like some grants for either startups or I know sometimes mostly nonprofit, but they also offer some technical assistance in some of these pieces too. So like Nashana, you mentioned a grant writer. I added the Locus group, which is like a BIPOC, which can be used as a directory for asking for some of these things as well. Yeah, and Propel, like I said, offers technical assistance to new entities. I feel like it's mostly nonprofit and fiscally sponsored orgs, but I'll have to double check.
We're fiscally sponsored by Propel, and this is the first time of me hearing this. So that's just a mere example. I have an amazing working relationship with Propel, but this is the example that I speak of what happens to these organizations. These big people get the money. They say they're going to do certain things, but then the resources are not available to our community. The gatekeeping, it has to stop. And I think a lot of that, we all have to work together collectively, even if we're in different spaces and we're targeting different groups of people. I think it's important for us to support one another's initiatives and figure out how I can be of assistance, or how can my business or organization be of assistance to your business and organization and things that you're doing. How can I share the resources that I have with you? Because if we just sit back and rely on these different entities that are supposed to be giving us the resources, co-ops are really good in a sense to be able to collectively say, hey, we're going after this. I would like to see a co-op where we have shared ideas under one co-op, meaning wellness, youth, arts, under one co-op, and it's for the sake of building Black wealth, because that's something that can be done versus complying to the norm. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I was gonna say something else too. I was gonna say in February we do normally a virtual cooperative tour, so we invite these different co-ops to speak. So there may be an opportunity to ask more of some of these questions that you're holding from people that have developed their cooperative work. And so we'll have a list of who those are as we get closer to, I think it's end of February when we have that. But in terms of resources too, I do want to name, which I know someone had reached out this year, but we just got a budget approved, and so I can finally move forward with that. But part of North Star. So North Star was started, right, as a space for Black folks to really dive into this different cooperative history and lessons and these technical pieces. But we also recognize that, we can't really start cooperatives in 6 months, especially when there's still all these institutional, systemic, like barriers in building this work that have been named in the morning and again this afternoon. And so one of the things that we did for starting cohort 3 was, like, establish an alumni fund to help with some of this. Now, the alumni fund is not a large fund as it should be, but it is like some smaller dollars that can help as you develop your cooperative. So people have used it to pay for a lawyer, to pay for marketing. If they have a conference and they have some things coming up, they've used it to help pay for those costs. To pay a grant writer to help with some of these grant writing processes. And so as we go through this cohort, I just want to make sure that I know that those resources are available, and I can share like the guideline of like what we ask. We just ask that you're a co-op group, you have an advisory team, and you've met at least 3 times. And funding is, well, the grant or I don't know what to call it. The amounts are very, very much based on availability. And what we've done is I've done anywhere from like helping someone register a co-op, like literally in the office for I think like $75 to like $10,000 asks. And that was very much dependent on if we had that funding and what they were doing. And so just want to make sure you know that there's that resource as well. Yeah.
I'm gonna come sit at you guys' office just and volunteer. I'm gonna come up there and work with y'all.
Come through.
I'm just gonna come like, hey,
home. A lot of us are still working from home, but come through. Let us know when you are coming so that we can be there too. Or I can be there, figure it out. But yeah. If you find a compliment, they usually give yes. That's a really good thank you before adding that, Carl. Yeah, you can. So the whole part of cooperatives is collectively organizing together. And like I think principle 6, as I think Patty talked about the principles earlier, is like cooperation amongst cooperatives. And so oftentimes if you have a cooperative that is similar to you, you can just reach out and ask for their bylaws so you don't have to recreate the wheel yourself and then figure out what works or what doesn't work. Like I said, we have different cooperative groups at different stages of development come through end of February. So if you feel like, and we're trying to figure out how to get some groups that more align with some of the works and projects that are happening in this space. So if there's someone that you like I don't know, Root Spring, if you really like their model, you can reach out to Signy and all those folks and talk to them more about the work they're doing. Yeah, if you're in the cannabis industry, there's Miss Angela, with 40 Acre Co-op and so many others doing some really incredible work. So if that's what you feel like. There's artist co-ops you can reach out to and like learn from and just connect and build those relationships as well. So you're not alone in this. We're all trying to figure it out. It's hard everywhere. It's weird. It's complex. It's convoluted when it shouldn't be. So yeah, you're not alone in this at all. Anything else, Liana?
Not for that, just
Okay.
moving into the survey if no one else has any other thoughts to share.
Okay, before we move in, oh, sorry, go ahead, Carl.
Cannabis industry. So I'm not in the industry, but I've been helping people organize around it over the past like 6 months. So they're gonna, if you know anybody who's in it that's Black or brown, they're starting to have meetings with the Office of Cannabis Management. And so if you reach out to me, I'll send you like the sign up for that. And then for people to know that St. Paul College has released like a cannabis industry info class, like it's all online and it's free. And so I think it's around like 8 or 9 weeks. So for anybody interested in that build, it's really they're starting to open up doors, and I've heard they even want to do a fund for people who are nationally who are going to be working, even those people who are just as impacted, trying to figure out ways that they can get into the industry without being discriminated against. So I think there's some ground floor things, and I don't know if everybody knew about those things happening within the next couple of months.
Yeah, absolutely. Please share that. Thanks for sharing. But yeah, please link those in the chat too, and we can share out to the rest of the co-op as well. I just the last minute announcement is a booking. So we'd like to check in with everyone, all the cooperative groups, to see how things are going, to see what's working, what's not working. So in the next wrap-up session email, there'll be a booking link where you can just schedule time with us, and I'll give you the Zoom link, etc. I already talked about alumni funds, but we could talk more about them too when you meet with us one-on-one. Earlier, Patty talked about the conference. So there's this Black Cooperative Agenda Conference that's thrown by the Neighborhood for Developing Conscious Communities, NDCC. Ron Hans is the ED for that. And so we're partnering with them this year to throw that conference here in St. Paul in July. It's really exciting. It's a national conference, so we're going to have some national Black cooperators. The mayor of St. Paul is going to be there speaking about some of this cooperative initiative work that he's leading. It's just a good space to connect with folks. I've been trying to go for 2 years and haven't been able to, so I'm excited that it's happening here. And we can talk more about what that will look like as it develops further, or if you might be interested in helping support it's happening and you might want to volunteer or volunteer into like a committee as we put this up, let me know too. I'm happy to, always happy to have folks, but we'll be trying to figure out like what a North Star space looks like in there too as we support this, since it's the Black Cooperative Conference. And also I'll share this, the deadline is coming up fast. My bad on that, but there's also another cooperative conference that happens with Repaired Nations where they take folks to Ghana or Tanzania to learn about different co-op stuff. So I can add that too. The deadline for that is coming up really soon, unfortunately, like it's I think 3 days or something, or 2 days. But they do it every year. Liana and I had the chance to go last year, and we can share more too in the check-ins, but it was beautiful. It was transformational. It was just wonderful to learn about the work that's happening and connect with folks, and also get to visit some of these sites that have so much historical impact. So yeah, I don't know what Tanzania will look like. Tanzania. I haven't been. I don't know we just know about Ghana. So, and then yeah, the next session we'll be talking about a cooperative business plan. So kind of drawing from this session, what we learned about co-ops, the development timeline, and then like actually putting that in the plan. What does that look like? And I think those are all the announcements that I had. And I see, Carl, is your hand still up from the last one, or do you have another thing? I'm gonna pass it to Liana now, and I'm gonna step back.
Thank you, Nicole. All right, so wanting to share our post-session survey, we are doing evaluation too. So if you could take a few minutes to fill that out, and then we will close. So maybe like 10 minutes or so. We'll give space for people to fill that out now. And then we'll wrap up. So let me know if you need the link again. It's in the chat. I think we could stop recording. I realized it was still recording.